Imagine standing in the center of a crowded square, your back exposed, the entire town watching, knowing that every lash of the whip will tear your skin and that coarse salt will be rubbed into your raw wounds. The air is thick with fear and anticipation. Every eye is on you. Every scream is your reality. Could you survive such relentless pain? Or would your spirit finally break? This is the story of a man tested beyond human limits, in a punishment so brutal, it will haunt anyone who witnesses it. The sun had barely begun its climb above the jagged rooftops when the market square of Dunbridge awoke, bustling with merchants, villagers, and wandering children. Stalls lined the cobblestones, heavy with crates of apples, hams, and bolts of cloth. The chatter of the townsfolk, the clatter of wooden wheels on stone, and the braying of animals filled the air. Yet a tension lingered, a tension that wasn't natural, that seemed to prick the back of every neck like an unseen hand. At the center of the square, the wooden pillory and whipping post stood as a silent, foreboding monolith. It was splintered in places, weathered by the seasons, but polished in others from constant use. Around it, a rough-hewn platform had been erected, low, enough for the crowd to lean over and peer, yet high enough to mark it as an altar of shame. Today, the air around it smelled faintly of tar and sweat, mixed with the metallic scent of anticipation, like the calm before a storm. A hush fell over the crowd as the town crier approached, his voice booming and hollow, cutting through the market's daily symphony. Citizens of Dunbridge, by the decree of Lord Carrick, the law will be enacted upon those who dare defy it. Let it be known, justice will not falter, nor mercy temper the consequences. His proclamation made heads turn, and the whispers that followed carried fear in every syllable. From the rear of the square, a man was dragged forward, his wrists bound with rough rope that cut into his skin. He stumbled, his bare feet scraping, the stones each step a protest, each grunt a plea for mercy that no one would grant. His back was arched in exhaustion, his shoulders already raw from prior punishment. His eyes, wide with terror, scanned the crowd, hoping for a flicker of compassion. There was none. Faces that had moments ago smiled at a passing child or haggled over tomatoes now stared with morbid curiosity. Some had their hands over their mouths, others craned their necks as if to taste the tension with their eyes. Beside the post, the executioner, a tall, muscular man with a scar running across his jaw, cleaned his whip with deliberate care. Each snap of the leather against his palm echoed like a drumbeat, synchronized with the quickened pulses in the crowd. Beside him lay a coarse sack of salt, its grains glinting like tiny shards of glass under the morning sun. No one spoke. No one moved closer. Every person present knew what was coming, and the air vibrated with that unspoken understanding. Pain, humiliation, and fire in the flesh. The bound man fell to his knees before the post, sweat matting his hair, his breath ragged. He could hear the whispering of the crowd behind him, the soft shuffle of feet as if even the cobblestones themselves recoiled. His heart hammered. He didn't know how many lashes he could endure, nor if the salt, cruelly promised, would break his body before his spirit. The executioner lifted the whip, the leather flexing like a living thing in his hands. The crowd drew in a collective breath, and the market square seemed to pause, holding its entire being in anticipation of the first, shattering crack. The whip fell with a sharp crack that cut through the murmurs like lightning through a storm. The sound made the air thrum with horror, and for a moment, the entire square froze. The man's scream was raw, primal, echoing off the stone buildings, bouncing back at him like a cruel chorus. His back arched violently as the leather tore through his skin, and the first blood fell in thin rivulets, glinting bright under the unforgiving sun. The executioner paused, lifting the whip again, allowing the silence to sink in like lead. Then methodically he lashed the man's shoulders a second time. The crowd flinched. Children buried their faces in the skirts of their mothers. Men clenched their fists, yet no one dared to intervene. Every strike was followed by a hiss of pain, a stifled sob, a shudder that ran through the man's entire body. When the third lash fell, the executioner reached for the coarse salt. With deliberate cruelty, He rubbed it into the open wounds, the grains biting into raw flesh, drawing screams that made the ears ache. The pain was unbearable, a fire that seemed to spread through every nerve, and the man's body jerked violently with each movement. His knees dug into the stone platform, scraping them raw, his palms clawed at the wood for support, but it did little to ease the agony. The crowd watched in a mixture of fascination and disgust. Some leaned forward, unable to look away. Others whispered prayers under their breath, shame and fear mingling in their eyes. The man's clothing, tattered and bloodied, stuck to his skin, further amplifying the torture with every movement. His vision blurred with tears, his lungs heaving, yet he forced himself to stay upright, clinging to the remnants of dignity that flickered within him like a dying flame. The executioner's rhythm was relentless. Each lash landed with precise cruelty, each application of salt ensuring the punishment was as much mental as it was physical. The man's groans turned to cries, cries to silent tears. And still, the crowd remained silent, consumed by the spectacle of suffering. Even the breeze seemed to pause, carrying only the faint metallic scent of blood and the stench of fear. By the 10th lash, his back was a canvas of crimson streaks, skin split and raw, every nerve alive with fire. He could barely stand, his mind oscillating between pain, shock, and disbelief. But still he held on. Somehow, amid the agony, a thought flickered. He would endure. He would survive. The world may have chosen to witness his humiliation, but his spirit, fragile as it seemed, refused to break completely. The executioner stepped back for a moment, surveying his work, whip coiled like a predator ready to strike again. The crowd drew a collective breath, awaiting the next strike, the next scream, and the continuation of a punishment that would be remembered by all who dared to look away. The sun climbed higher, burning down on the square, but its warmth could not soften the terror that hung over the crowd. The man's back throbbed with a pain that seemed to pulse in time with his racing heart. Each breath was a struggle, each movement a trial. Yet he remained on the platform, bound and exposed. The executioner circled him like a predator, whip coiled in one hand, salt in the other, studying every twitch, every flinch, with cold precision. Another crack of the whip split the air, followed by the wet sting of leather on raw flesh. The man cried out again, a sound that tore through the square, and for a moment the crowd flinched as though they felt each strike themselves. The salt was applied with meticulous cruelty, rubbed into the open wounds until each motion sent sparks of agony shooting through his body. His back felt as if it were on fire, and his screams grew hoarse from the constant torment. He tried to lean forward to lessen the sting, but the ropes cut deep into his wrists, and the platform beneath him offered no comfort. Every nerve in his body screamed in protest, yet he refused to collapse. His face, streaked with sweat and blood, betrayed a mixture of terror and defiance. His mind wandered to fleeting memories, a warm hearth, laughter of his children, the smell of rain on the some fields. Those memories became shields, small fragments of hope he clung to, and they gave him the strength to endure the merciless punishment. The executioner's movements were rhythmic now, almost mechanical. Crack, salt, scream, crack, salt, scream, a relentless cycle designed to break the body and humiliate the soul. The crowd's fascination had grown morbid. Some faces were pale with horror. Others were twisted in curiosity and excitement, unable to look away. Mothers held their children tight, while men exchanged uneasy glances, silently acknowledging that this was justice, harsh and merciless, in its rawest form. By the 15th lash, the man's back was a tapestry of blood and torn flesh. His skin had split in several places, and the raw wounds glistened in the sunlight. Yet despite the agony, something stubborn burned within him. Each lash chipped away at his body, but his spirit remained, flickering defiantly in the face of unimaginable suffering. The executioner paused for only a moment, letting the silence stretch, allowing the crowd to absorb the sight of human resilience and human torment. The man's chest heaved, each breath rattling in his throat. His eyes, though clouded with pain, glimmered with determination. He had survived so far, And even as the whip hovered above him, he resolved not to give the satisfaction of collapse to those who watched. The square was silent except for the rasping of his breath, the whisper of the breeze, and the faint murmur of the crowd, each person caught between dread, sympathy, and fascination. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones, yet the heat of the day was nothing compared to the fire consuming the man's back. Every nerve ending screamed as if the leather whip had ignited a storm inside him. The raw wounds, rubbed with coarse salt, burned with a relentless intensity. His legs trembled under him, his knees scraping the wooden platform with every twitch, but he refused to collapse. Pride, desperation, or sheer stubbornness, he did not know, but something within him would not surrender. The crowd had grown restless. Some whispered amongst themselves, debating the man's crime and whether the punishment was just. Others watched in morbid fascination, unable to tear their eyes away. Children were dragged behind skirts and hands, their young minds absorbing a cruelty they could not yet comprehend. The man's screams punctuated the air, echoing through the square, raw and ragged, tearing at the edges of everyone's conscience. The executioner stepped closer, whip raised high, his movements almost ritualistic now. He struck again, the leather slicing into raw flesh, the man's scream tearing into the afternoon air. Salt followed, ground cruelly into the open wounds, the grains scratching and burning, ensuring every nerve screamed. Blood ran freely down his back, soaking the tattered remnants of his tunic, dripping onto the platform and pooling in the cracks between the cobblestones. Each drop glistened in the sun, a silent witness to agony. His arms shook violently as the rope bit deeper into his wrists, but he forced himself upright, shoving down the instinct to collapse, to hide, to end the torment. His mind, foggy from pain, clung to fragments of memory, the warmth of his mother's kitchen, the laughter of friends in the village square, the soft comfort of a pillow at night. These fleeting visions were shields, small islands of solace, in a sea of suffering, and he clung to them desperately. The executioner's eyes were unflinching, almost clinical. He delivered each lash with precision, watching for any sign of weakness, any falter in the man's spirit. The salt, cruel, and unyielding, followed each strike. With every scream, the square seemed to shrink. The crowd's collective breath, held in an unspoken acknowledgement of human endurance, pushed to the brink. By the 20th lash, his back was a raw, bleeding map of agony, streaked with crimson and dotted with torn skin. Each movement, each breath was agony incarnate. Yet beneath the pain, a defiance remained, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished. Even as his vision blurred with sweat, tears, and the sting of salt, he raised his head slightly, daring the crowd to see that despite the punishment, he had not yet broken. The square, silent and tense, seemed to pause with him. The executioner, sensing the culmination of suffering, paused as well, whip coiled, salt ready. Every eye turned to the bound figure, awaiting the next strike, the next scream, the continuation of a punishment that would leave scars far deeper than flesh alone. The sun hung low, casting a crimson hue over the market square, as if the sky itself mourned the man's suffering. His body sagged on the platform, back a tortured landscape of raw, bloodied skin, salt still burning like fire in every wound. Sweat and tears mixed with blood streaking down his face as he struggled to breathe, each inhalation a jagged reminder of the agony he had endured. The executioner circled him one final time, whip coiled like a serpent ready to strike. The crowd's tension was palpable. Some leaned forward, others averted their eyes, but all held their breath, anticipating the last blow that would seal the man's torment. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood, the acrid tang of sweat, and the faint whisper of a life hanging by a thread. With one swift motion, the whip cracked against his back, the sting shooting through him, making him cry out with every ounce of strength left in his body. Salt followed, ground mercilessly into the open wounds. The man's scream was a raw, guttural sound, carrying both terror and defiance. His body shuddered violently with each strike, every nerve alight with pain, yet he remained upright, unwilling to give the crowd the satisfaction of seeing him collapse. As the final lash fell, the executioner stepped back, observing the aftermath of his work. The man's back was a mangled map of crimson streaks, raw flesh exposed and glistening under the fading sunlight. His breathing was ragged, his muscles trembling from exhaustion, and yet, in the depths of his agony, a spark of resilience endured. He had survived. He had endured what seemed impossible, and though his body was broken, his spirit, bruised but unbowed, remained intact. The crowd was silent for a moment, a collective recognition of the extremes of human suffering and endurance. Some turned away, unable to witness the finality of such brutality, while others whispered prayers, gratitude, or fear. Children clung to their parents, eyes wide, absorbing lessons they would never fully understand. The man's defiance, however, subtle, left a mark far beyond the physical scars on his back. Finally, the ropes were loosened and he fell to the platform, trembling but conscious. The executioner, expression unreadable, gave a curt nod and stepped aside. Villagers moved cautiously forward, some offering water, others simply staring, their own hearts heavy with the weight of what they had witnessed. The man lowered himself to the cobblestones, feeling the rough stone bite into his knees. But each pain was a reminder. He had survived, and survival, in that moment, was a victory in itself. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the square in deep shadow, the man rose slowly, each step a testament to resilience. The whipping post, now stained and silent, stood as a grim monument to both suffering and endurance. And in the hearts of those who watched, a quiet understanding settled. Pain could break the body, but the human spirit, when fiercely determined, could endure even the harshest torment. The square emptied slowly, whispers fading into the evening, leaving behind only the echoes of screams, salt, and fire in the flesh, a story that would linger in memory far longer than any punishment could linger on the body. The sun sets over the empty market square. The whipping post stands silent, its wood darkened by the day's horrors. The man walks away, trembling, his back a map of pain, but his spirit unbroken. The crowd disperses, carrying with them the memory of what they saw, the cruelty, the suffering, and the human endurance that refused to bow. Some will never forget the screams, others will never forget the lesson. Even in the face of unbearable torment, the human spirit can endure. Pain may scar the body, but true strength lives in resilience, and sometimes surviving is the greatest victory of all.